struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So in the purport of this particular verse, Srila Prabhupada stresses...
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, your script has not come.
Oh yes, Prabhuji, I will come. So in the purport of this particular verse, Srila Prabhupada clears the concept of two types of expansions of the Lord. So first type of expansion is called as primary expansion or personal expansion, also called as Swamsha. Swamsha means Swa means self and Amsha means part and parcel. So those expansions of Lord Krishna, which are his own personal expansions, namely the Vishnu Murtis or Vishnu Tattvas, like say for example, Srila Prabhupada gives all the various incarnations of the Lord, like Lord Ramachandra, Lord Narsimha, all the Vishnu expansions, namely the Purusha avatars, the Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, and all other personal incarnations of the Lord, they are part of this Vishnu Tattva category. So they are called as the personal expansions of Krishna or primary expansions. Whereas the secondary expansions are also called as Vibhinna Amsha. Vibhinna means separate and Amsha means part and parcel, are the living entities like all the Devatas, living entities like all the aquatics, plants, birds, human beings, all 8.4 million species of life. However, one caveat in this is that for the living entities residing on the higher planets, Srila Prabhupada also mentions in Bhagavad Gita, in Srimad Bhagavatam, that for the topmost living beings in the material world, like Lord Brahma's position or Lord Indra's position, sometimes if Krishna doesn't find a qualified jiva, qualified Vibhinnamsha, separated expansion, then sometimes Krishna expands himself to take up these positions. So all these are positions. Brahma, Chandra, Indra, Varuna, Vayu, all these devatas are nothing but posts. Like we have the post of a prime minister, which is occupied by a person who is qualified at that point in time. Similarly, for the devatas, demigods, also we have living entities who are qualified to take up this post. And if Krishna doesn't find any, then he expands himself. But in general case, current case, these living entities are occupying this higher post, Vibhinnamshas. So we proceed. And Srila Prabhupada also mentions that all these Vibhinnamshas, the living entities, as part of their constitutional position, they have been given an independence, but this independence is minute independence. Like example can be given of a cow or any other animal, say a goat, which is tied with a rope. So the radius of the rope, whatever is the radius to the point where the animal is tied, that animal, the cow, has the freedom to walk around that radius, around the central point. But if the cow wants to go outside the circle, she cannot go unless the rope is either loosened or if it is extended. Similarly, all of us, we have independence, but we have a very limited type of independence. Like Srila Prabhupada also gives the example that as a citizen of a country, we have the privilege or facility to move around to any place within that country, within that region. But if somebody wants to travel to a foreign country for which the person doesn't have citizenship or a visa, then he cannot go just like by the desire. He will have to first qualify himself or herself by getting the proper visa to enter that place, and then he will be able to enter the country. So we have independence, but it is a limited independence on what we can do in this world. And if we have to go beyond that, then we need to have a certain grant, certain visa. Similarly, this independence is very important, although it is minute, because that independence can result in us being, getting into a liberated position, us getting into a higher status of life in the higher planetary system, or us degrading ourselves by misusing that particular independence, by not using the independence properly. The living entity can degrade itself, and specifically this independence applies to the human beings who have got the power of discrimination. For the animals as such, they are into auto mode, so they are not bound by the reactions of their activities. But human life, because it is considered the life of responsibility, we are held responsible for our actions on how we use this particular independence, although it is minute. And Srila Prabhupada also stresses the point on in this particular verse of Prakriti sthani karshati, manashashtani indriyani, Prakriti sthani karshati. And the word karshati is translated as struggling very hard. Why the living entity is considered as struggling very hard? Because he or she being always bound, shackled by the various chains. And in 14th chapter, in this particular section of the three modes, we had discussed how various modes of material nature are considered to shackles or chains. Like mode of goodness is considered to golden shackles, mode of passion can be considered to the silver shackles, whereas the mode of ignorance is considered to is compared to the iron shackles. Why? Because all these different modes ultimately bind the conditioned soul in this world, and one is not free to get out of this world unless we come out of these shackles. And one is here mentioned as being bound by the subtle bodies of mind and our false ego. And mind is mentioned as the chief agent which drives the living entities in this material existence, because based on the mind the desires develop, and based on the desires we saw how we are made to conduct our activities in a particular way. And thus we had also discussed in the previous chapters, chapter 14 as well as earlier part of Bhagavad Gita, even in chapter 5, how the material nature or the modes are mentioned as the real doer and not the Jivatma. Jivatma is responsible only as far as developing a particular type of desire is concerned. So this particular chapter talks about the living entities struggling to get out of these shackles because of being bound by them. Hare Krishna, Namanishta Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Namanishta Prabhuji, you want to comment on this?
Prabhuji, continue.
Okay. So the next verse, it's actually a set of verses from text 8 to 11, where Krishna talks about the migration of the living entities from one body to another, and how does this migration happen. He gives various analogies to explain this point. So we'll recite the text first and then we publish the images and the text here. Text 8. Shariram yadavapnoti yacchapyutramatishwarah grahitvaitani samyati vayurgandha nivashaya. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. Shotram chakshusparshanam cha rasanam granameva cha adhisthaya manaschayam vishayamupasevate. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He means the living entity. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Text 10. Utkramantam sthitam vapi gunjanam va gunanvitam vimudānānu paṣyanti jnana chakshusha. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. And the last verse in this section. Yatanto yoginaschainam paschantyatmanyavasthitam yatantopyakrutatmano nainam paschantya chetasaha. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. So here Krishna is giving the analogy to start the section with of a air carrying the aroma. So it is mentioned that when the conditioned living entity leaves his or her body, the subtle body of the living entity, including the mind, intelligence, and false ego, carries the soul, the jivatma, based on the desires, the consciousness that we have developed from one body to the next, which is developed based on our consciousness. So Krishna gives the analogy of the Vayur Gandha Nivashaya, air carrying the various types of aromas. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas, and thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So here it is also explained by Srila Prabhupada that based on the consciousness that we develop even before giving up this body, we are trained to accept another type of body after we give up this one. Like say for example, a person is very envious and for no reason he or she is wanting to do harm to others, then a person can take birth in an envious type of body like that of a snake or that of a scorpion, which tries to harm other persons for no good reason. Or if one is desiring to eat type of foodstuffs which is not suitable for the human body, then one will be given accordingly a suitable body for the living entity to fulfill the desires to eat those type of foodstuffs. So, and according to the type of body that we are destined to get, we are trained in a particular way. Namanishta Prabhuji, you want to mention anything on this?
Prabhuji, continue. Very nice.
Oh, okay. And in the next verse, which is text 8, Krishna mentions the various types of the Jnanendriyas, the knowledge acquiring senses, which we get based on the desires we have developed. Like say, for example, if somebody has an intense desire to eat a certain type of food which is not suitable for the human body, then one will need to get that type of sense where that sense enjoyment is enabled. Or say, for example, one is wanting to enjoy a particular type of sense, say for example the sense of touch or the sense of smell, then that particular sense organs are given in such a way that we have the capacity to enjoy the sense objects through the senses. Like say for example, it is mentioned that dogs can smell something from far away distance, and our the ability to smell a thing is not that advanced, or they can even sense the frequencies which are of the lower bands as well as of the higher bands, whereas the human beings, they can only hear with what is within a given band of the frequency. So similarly here it is mentioned, and one second, the living entity thus takes another body and obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. Why all these senses are grouped around mind? Because mind is mentioned as the storage house, the originating place of all our desires. And based on the senses that we get as a result of the new body, based on our consciousness, we thus enjoy a particular set of sense objects. Now here we have shown few specific living species based on the various senses. So we would like devotees to raise their hand of do they observe any particular significance or relevance for these living entities which are shown here with respect to these senses. What is special about these living entities corresponding to the five senses? Any volunteer to explain this? Like we have a picture showing a moth or a bumblebee. Guru Nishtha Mataji, Hare Krishna, please unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. The moth is sense of taste, the tongue. That's what he's focusing on.
Sorry, moth is standing for sense of,
The bumblebee is
sorry,
focusing.
smell. Yes,
No.
Mataji. And what is special with this bumblebee? Just this example.
Maybe in the previous life, the soul focused on taste, food,
So-
and everything. So this
Yes.
guy with tasting the nectar all over, all the time.
Yes, Mataji, you are very close, and thank you for sharing that. Vani Kumari Mataji, Hare Krishna. Please unmute yourself. Yes, yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
There is for music Prabhuji.
Yes, yes. But what is special about the
Yes
deer?
Prabhuji. Yes Prabhuji.
Yes, 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 true. And what happens to the deer when it gets captivated by the sound of the flute or a specific music? What happens to it?
It
Mhm. Feel free to this, even if you're not sure. All right, all right. No
I
issue.
know Prabhuji. I want to explain.
Take your time. Mataji. If once you recollect, you can again unmute yourself. Not an issue. Shama Gopika Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, the deer is captivated by the nice music,
Mhm.
and hunter use this particular thing. They play a nice music and then they attract the deer, and that's how they hunt the deer.
Capture, yeah,
Capture.
capture. And similarly for the bumblebee also it is mentioned, because the bumblebee is so engrossed in smell of the lotus and so attracted to the nectar, that it is explained in Srila Prabhupada's books that once the sunset happens, the lotus petals they close and the bumblebee gets stuck, and by the next morning when the petals again open, the bumblebee is no more, right? So all these are examples of the various species. Hare Krishna, Rohini Mataji, please unmute yourself. You want to share anything on this?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare
And the
Moth.
moth is attracted towards light,
Mhm.
that's the eyesight,
Mhm.
and it goes so close to the light that it gets burnt.
Right.
And then, can I explain the rest or
Yes, yes,
some?
yes, yes, Mataji, please go ahead.
So the fish there, it is attracted to the taste tongue. So it is whenever the fisherman puts any food, he immediately wants to go and eat it, and because of that he is getting caught by the fisherman.
Yes.
And the next one is the elephant, where I think to capture the elephant, they use a female elephant to give calls, and then the male elephant comes because of sense of touch, some kind, yeah, and then they capture the elephant.
Yes, Mataji, thank you very much. So example is given that the elephant is caught using a pit which is covered with the grass, and they have a trained female elephant to which the male elephant gets attracted and he tries to follow and gets into the pit and gets caught. So these are the examples of various species mentioned here to represent how the living entity, based on his or her desire to enjoy a particular sense, gets a type of body, and through that desire to enjoy the senses, he also gets caught in this the conditioned life through the enjoyment of the senses, through the sense objects. So we proceed. And Krishna is next mentioning in text 10 and text 11 that only those people who are in real knowledge, they can observe this particular thing. What is the thing they can observe? How the soul is transmigrating from one body to another based on the desire, and how they are getting captivated. So here Krishna mentions in text 11, I'll just read the translation again. The endeavoring transcendentalist who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place. Now, there are few interesting statements by Srila Prabhupada in the purport that we are going to see. So, if we can have a devotee to read out the part of the purport on the right side. Let's see. Guru Nishtha Mataji, you want to read out?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you.
Mataji, you can mute one of your
Yeah.
device. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Every living entity is quitting his body under certain circumstances. He is living under certain circumstances and he is enjoying under certain circumstances under the spell of material nature. As a result, he is suffering different kinds of happiness and distress under the illusion of sense enjoyment. A person.
Yes, Mother. We'll just take a short brief gap here. So, Srila Prabhupada is writing here, as a result, the living entity is suffering different types of happiness and distress, which means even the so-called happiness in this material world, how it is a cause of one's suffering can be seen by a person in knowledge. So just one example I would like to mention, which I had heard, that one time a very famous actress, I don't know the name, she visited ISKCON temple in Mumbai, and many a times these well-known people do visit, and everybody in the temple was like in awe and reverence of this special VIP person visiting, and everybody was giving a special treatment to this actress. But when one of the very senior members of the temple, the resident monk, when Maharaj saw the actress, that his reaction after she left the temple premises, he obviously spoke with her very nicely, explained about various activities and all. But after the actress had left the place, Maharaj, when talking to the resident devotees, was mentioning that how much she is suffering because of the level of expectation that she is carrying while moving about from the public, etc. So a person who is in knowledge, Krishna mentions, can see even the material happiness or material distress both as the cause of suffering. Whereas in our conditioned state, a person tends to enjoy the happiness given by the sense objects and tends to suffer whenever there is a distress. But a person in knowledge sees both these things as a cause of suffering only. Yes, Guru Nishtha Madhaj, please proceed.
A person in such knowledge can understand how the conditioned living entity is suffering in this material existence. Therefore, those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to give this knowledge to the people in general, for their conditional life is very much troublesome. They should come out of it and be Krishna conscious and liberate themselves to transfer to the spiritual world.
Yes, ma'am. So just one clarification here. Those that is referred to stands for the persons who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness, and the they in the last statement stands for people who are conditioned. So Namanishta Prabhuji, you want to share anything on this particular point? Hare Krishna, Namanishta Prabhuji. So whenever Prabhuji is back, we'll again request him to unmute. But is there any comment or any query on this particular point, that how the happiness as well as distress in this material world both are cause of suffering only? Any thoughts on this? Any particular devotees? Hare
Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Surya. Yes, ma'am.
The enjoyment, so-called enjoyment in this material world is also a cause of suffering, because sometime or the other it is going to end, and cessation of any happiness is again unhappiness or sorrow.
Yes.
Like the absence of light is darkness. So like that, absence of happiness is sorrow in this material world.
Yes, and
So-
also Srila Prabhupada also gives the example, the so-called happiness in this world, there is no happiness as such. It is only the interval between the two miseries, the relief as such. Yes, Sureka Mataji, please go ahead. You complete what you wanted to say.
Yes, that's it, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Prakash Parekh, thank you, Sureka Mataji. Prakash Prabhu, please unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Actually, the happiness and misery in the material life, happiness is nothing but absence of misery.
Misery. Yes, yes, Prabhuji. And there is also a famous example which Srila Prabhupada gives to explain this point. You recollect any example, Prabhuji?
No, Prabhuji.
Like one example, Prabhupada quotes is the punishment that was given to the thieves and criminals in the older times, which in the modern times is also called waterboarding, where the thief was put submerged into the water just till the time he is getting out of breath, and just before he would get out of breath he would be picked out of water and he would again gasp for his breath, and he would feel very relieved that I am thankfully out of water and still alive, and again he would be put into the water. So this is one example which Prabhupada gives, and another one also, there is one more. We'll see if devotees want to share any other example. Murli Prabhu, Hare Krishna, please unmute yourself here.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Yes,
Prabhuji, I cannot tell you about the example, but about the happiness and distress, these are functions of the mind. Yeah, because they are functions of the mind, they are associated with an individual during a short duration of time. Because of that, they will be an ending. All the time there will be ending. As the previous Mataji has said, once non-having happiness is also sorrow. So from that point of view, yes, these are, because it's associated with the mind and it is short-lived. It is always the happiness and sorrow are actually more like mirages rather than they are actually there.
Yes.
This is the point I have seen, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much, Murli Prabhu. And another example which Prabhupada also.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Vani Mataji. Hare Krishna. Please go ahead.
More desires are there, Prabhuji. Desires also goes to happiness, Prabhuji.
Sorry, just repeat that again, Mataji.
Desires.
More desires.
Desires. More desires. Material, in the material world, more desires are there. They are not
Prabhuji, should I give one example?
they are not success. They are not success in that in the life. That is a unhappy.
Okay, Mataji. So what you are saying is, the more the desires one have and one is not able to fulfill them, it leads to more unhappiness. Yes, Mataji,
Yes,
unfulfilled. Thank
Should I
you.
give you one,
Yes.
Hare Krishna, should I give
Yes.
you one example?
Yes, K.K. Mukherjee, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You see, living entity, when they are staying in this world, they may be having a family or so. So what happens is, the salient example is, see, during the summer season, there are people who travel to the hill stations and they enjoy the circumstances over there because of the little chill and all that. Oh, what a nice place we have come and all that. They take the trouble of going there. As soon as their stay is over, when they come down, they again face the situation where they had gone from. Immediately they are exposed to the sun. Again, they are exposed to the natural things there. So at that time, there is a happiness and distress. Both are very visible in these kind of people. This is that we call live example of people enjoying the circumstances around. In a very short period, the change in climate in one place and another place, and then coming back to the old place has a very what I mean to say is they are understanding the difference of circumstances immediately.
Got it. So although they are going to a hill station or a tourist place to enjoy a nice weather, but once they are back, they have to face the realities.
Punarmushika bhava. They become punarmushika bhava.
Yes, thank you very much. And another frequent example quoted by Prabhupada is that of a camel chewing the cactus, the thorny bush in the desert. Prabhupada mentions that the camel is chewing the thorny bush and he's thinking that there is a juice coming out of the thorny bush, but actually it is the gums of the camel bleeding, and he's testing his own blood, which initially tastes very nice, but after a while the pain is so much that the camel is no more able to chew on the thorny bush and the whole mouth becomes bloody. So the happiness in this material world, so-called material happiness, is also the cause of distress. So we have few examples coming on the chat. First one by Ankit Prabhu. He mentions example of the bees. So this is also one of the 26 spiritual master gurus from which the Avanti Brahmana learned the lesson that they collect the nectar with great endeavor and they build their honeycombs, they store the honey, but at the end when the hunter comes and or the bear comes and forcibly drives away the honeybees out of the beehive, and the whole honey that they have stored with great endeavor is all taken away. And Neetu Mataji has shared, material happiness always leads to distress. Say we have birthday anniversary celebrations with great pomp and show off, and after the party we can witness the people involved are down with health issues. Thank you, Neetu Mataji. So
Sugar cane also, Prabhuji. Sugar cane also example to take that situation.
Okay, can you just explain, Vani Mataji, the example?
Sugar cane, Prabhuji. Sugar cane juice. Sugar cane juice also sweet. After the juice is going, only cane is.
Then there is no juice even if one tries to chew.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Vani Kumari Mataji. Hare Krishna. So we proceed now. So Srila Prabhupada, there is one quote by Srila Prabhupada from the purport of 1321, which we would read. K.K. Mukherjee Prabhu, you want to read this? Hare Krishna, you have your hand raised, Prabhuji. Or any
Getting muted, yes. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhuji.
Once placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature because the body, being matter, acts according to the laws of nature. At that time, the living entity has no power to change that law. Suppose an entity is put into the body of a dog. As soon as he is put into the body of a dog, he must act like a dog. He cannot act otherwise. And if the living entity is put into the body of a hog, then he is forced to eat stool and act like a hog. So over the purport 13.21.
Yes, thank you very much. And in the scriptures, we do read the story of the king of the heaven who had got this curse one time to become a hog, and even the king of the heaven got attached to the lower type of enjoyment in this body of a hog that he had to be literally pushed out of that body to return back to the heavenly kingdom. So Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that once we have got the result of our desires and what we deserve in the form of the next body, at that time we don't have any control. We would need to forcibly act in those circumstances, in those particular type of body that we have received. We don't have any choice based on the modes of material nature we have acquired. So we proceed. So the next section, which is text 12 to 15, Krishna explains that although one may be drawn into the lower modes and one may be transmigrating from one body to another due to the material desires, but how Krishna as the maintainer both externally and internally, he still keeps maintaining all the living entities, and how he desires the good for all the living entities, wanting them to come back to him at certain point, and how he facilitates that by maintaining the living entities. So these are text 12 to 15. So we'll recite the text first. Is there any commentaries? P.S. Murthy Prabhu, you want to say something? You have just unmuted yourself. Hare Krishna. All right. Text 12. Yadadityagatam tejo jagadbhasayate khilam yaschandramasi yachagno tattejo vidhimamakam. The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me, and the splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire are also from me. Text 13. Gama vishyacha bhutani dharayamyaham ojasa ushnami chaushadi sarva somo bhutva rasatmakaha. I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. So these two verses cover the first three set of pictures that are shown here. So Krishna is acting as our maintainer through the external cosmic manifestation by providing the energy and source of energy and light to the sun. He is also mentioned as the one because of whom the moon is giving moonshine, which the Bhagavad Gita explains is required for developing all the juices and growth of the vegetables and plants. So it is mentioned that all the vegetables, fruits, they derive the succulent nature, they derive their specific taste only because of moonshine. And Prabhupada explains in the purport, if there is no moonshine, then the vegetables and the fruits, they cannot have their natural taste and the nourishment that they give us. So Krishna is maintaining us by providing the sunshine and the moonshine, by which we will get all this nourishment to our material body. And then in the next verse, Krishna also explains how he is also maintaining us internally by giving the fire of digestion. So this is text 14. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyannam Chaturvidam. So he is also acting as the fire of digestion within our stomach, which basically digests the food and creates energy for the body to sustain and maintain. So here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that Krishna is maintaining us both externally in the form of making the food available in the form of fruits, vegetables, grains, etc., as well as he is maintaining us internally by acting in the form of fire of digestion. And if this fire of digestion gets affected, like we have indigestion and other bodily complaints for which we have to seek treatment. So importance, significance of Krishna as the maintainer, both externally as well as internally. And then apart from these two factors of how Krishna is maintaining externally and internally, he also mentions one more factor, which is the subtle one. Text 15. Sarvasya chaham hrudi sannivishto mata smrutir jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvair aham eva vedyo vedanta krutveda videva chaham. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta. I am the knower of all the Vedas. So Krishna not only maintains the physical body of us in terms of external facilities that he provides and the internal ones, but he also resides as the Paramatma who initiates all our activities based on the desires that we have been carrying in from our last life. Like we saw the example analogy of air carrying aroma and our subtle body carrying our desires to the next body accordingly. So all these desires, when we get our next body, Lord Krishna gives us the required remembrance of what desire we had and what action we should be taking to fulfill those desires. At the same time, those of our remembrances which are not conducive to enjoying those particular type of desires, he also makes us forget. Like Srila Prabhupada explains in the class on this particular text, that if Krishna doesn't give us forgetfulness, then we won't be able to enjoy anything in this world. Like say, for example, if we remember all the harsh recollections of the deaths, the ends we have encountered in our past life, we would always be going through those traumas, and it will never ever be possible for us to enjoy anything in this world for which we have come here. So Krishna not only gives us the recollections of whatever remembrance we need, but he also gives us the forgetfulness. He also makes us forget all the unwanted memories which will hamper the enjoyment of our desires. So he's maintaining us both externally physically, internally physically, as well as acting as the Paramatma, as the initiator of all our actions, and as the one who is giving us the remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So any doubt or query? Namanishta Prabhuji, you want to say anything on this particular point? Let me also share the attendance link. Devotees want to share any thoughts, inputs, or any queries on this particular point of how Krishna is maintaining us externally, internally, and also as Paramatma, as the Super Soul, by guiding what we are able to recollect. Right. So we proceed. So can we have any devotee to read these parts of the purport for the next 2-3 slides? Hare Krishna. Usha Kamat Mataji, Hare Krishna. Please unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Vedanta Krit, text 15.15. As already explained, the Lord in his incarnation as Vyasadeva compiled the Vedanta Sutra. Here, the Lord is giving in summary the contents of the Vedanta Sutra, 15.16 purport.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. So in addition to all the points we discussed in terms of Krishna's maintenance of the living entities externally, internally, and controlling their recollections, here Srila Prabhupada also explains in the purport that Krishna in this particular appearance as Vyasadeva, it is Krishna's own personal expansion. So normally Vyasadeva is also mentioned as a post, like the Devatas, like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, Vayu, Brahma, etc. All these are posts. Vyasadeva is also a post where a qualified Jiva takes this position to write the various scriptures. But in this particular incarnation of Srila Vyasadeva, Lord Krishna himself has expanded to give the Veda, the summary of the Vedas in the form of Vedanta Sutras and the commentary on Vedanta Sutras in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Lord in his incarnation as Vyasadeva, he compiles the Vedanta Sutras, and in summary, the contents of the Vedas are given, and the commentaries on the Vedanta Sutras is also given. And Srila Prabhupada also explains in the purport how these Vedas act as the guideline, the guiding principles for the mankind, how to progressively march towards going back home, back to Godhead. So that's how is one more contribution from Krishna for the living entities. So any particular point. So there is one comment here by Ankit Prabhu on the chat. Here we can see the Achintya Shakti, the inconceivable energy of Krishna, as Tade Chati Tanne Jati Tada Dure Tadam Tike Ishopanishad Mantra 3, that he is inside and outside at the same time. Thank you very much, Ankit Prabhu, for sharing this. Any other point any devotee wants to share on this particular section before we proceed to the group activity?
Prabhuji, is it a small typo? At the end, it is written 15.16 purport.
Hang
15.15.
on. It could be that this, let me
No, I
see.
just went through.
Yes, yes, Mother. So it is like it
Hare
is.
Krishna.
Right. Thank you. So we now proceed to the group activity, which is based on the preaching application. Let me just copy this into the chat window. So we will have 15 minutes for preparation. Say around how many devotees are there? 58, 59. So we'll make around 7 groups or 8 groups of 7 members each. Each group will have 15 minutes to prepare the relevant philosophical points which we can use for our preaching purpose from these 2 important texts from 15 chapter 15:7 and 15:15. So you can refer to the text and the purports and draw up these points. So I did go through these texts before, and there are total minimum we should have around 6 to 7 points out of these texts. So we'll have 3 groups, and we will request devotees to draw up like say 7 to 8 points, so that even if 2 of your points are covered by another group, you still have points to present, which we can utilize in preaching. So let me just put this on the chat. So is the activity clear? How what all points we can draw from these 2 important texts from chapter number 15, which can be used in our preaching programs to explain various concepts to the participants. So let me make the breakout rooms. So I'll make 8 rooms. Okay. Any question or query on this group exercise before we go into the breakout rooms? Dharmeshwar Prabhu, is it clear, Prabhuji? Divya Rukmini Mataji, you can just.
Yes, Prabhuji, it is clear.
Okay, okay, fine. So we'll get into the breakout rooms. Hare Krishna, Manas Prabhu, Mannat Mataji, Priyadarshini Mataji, any issues in joining the rooms? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Rupali Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Mataji, Dandas Mataji. You want to join a particular group for the group activity?
No, Prabhuji, I was there in group 7. So.
You are done already?
Yes.
Okay. 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 Quick. Okay. Fine.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Vilas Prabhu. Yes,
Prabhuji, actually I joined late, so I cannot able to join that one group. Any group.
Okay. Let me just put you. But you are clear on the activity, Vilas Prabhu?
Yes.
Let me just add you to a breakout room. Okay, just give me 1 minute.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Hello. Sorry, Vilas, could you just 1 minute? Ramesh Prabhu, was the time given slightly on a higher side for preparation?
Yeah, Prabhu. I think we could cover because there were only 2 verses, right?
Right. Okay, fine. So we are just closing other breakout rooms. We'll start the discussion soon. And did all the participants in the group participated in the discussion?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. All right. Do we have all the devotees in now? Okay. So we'll have, it's not possible to have all the groups present their points. So we'll have around 3 groups present 2 to 3, 2 points each. Okay, but do present them. Oops. Yes, attendance link was shared. Let me just share it again. 1 second. Yeah. So we can have 1 devotee present 2 points. Just present those extensively. Okay, and time limit we'll try and stick to is around 3 minutes per group. So you can have maybe 1 or 2 volunteers from your group for each group. So we will start with group breakout room 1, which was Ankit Prabhu, Murli Kari Prabhu, Pradosh Prabhu, Rajiv Sondur Prabhu, Rohini Mataji, Shama Gopika Mataji, and Vivek Sharma Prabhu. So if we
Hare
can
Krishna.
have Hare Krishna Shama Gopika Mataji. Yes, ma'am.
So Prabhuji, starting from like 15.7. So in 15.7, we see that the living entity is like eternally separated fragmental part of Krishna. So we need to know Krishna. That is one preaching application, and there are like 2 types of expansions of Krishna. It is given there, which is like one is primary and the other one is secondary. So primary expansion is nothing but Vishnu Tattva and various incarnations of Lord, and the secondary expansions is the living entities, including the demigods. And living entity has minute independence. Because he is a fragmental part of the Lord, so he has got the Lord is like fully independent. Likewise, living entity is also got minute independence. So with this minute independence is granted to the living entity, and if the living entity misuses this independence, he becomes conditioned. And if with the proper use of the independence, he becomes liberated.
So one question on what you just mentioned to as a preaching application. How do we explain the concept of Jnanis merging into the Lord when you talk about a living entity is always a part and parcel, always a fragmental part and never ever becomes one with Krishna? Then how do we explain the concept of liberation for the Jnanis?
It is, we can give the example of the tree, Prabhu. Tree and 2 birds are there. So when we see from far away, it feels like the tree, I mean the 2 birds are, the tree is one. But then when we take a closer look, we see that there are 2 birds. One is the living entity and the other one is the super soul, who is watching the activities of living entity. So actually when the Jnanis say they are merging into the Supreme Brahma, Supreme Personality, yeah. So but then it is not actually, they are not going,
one.
It's not becoming one. They are individual, and there is always a chance of falling down from Supreme Brahma.
Thank you very much, Shama Gopika Mataji. Any other point you had planned for your group?
Yes, Prabhu, like we have other points also, like
Oh,
the living.
one point you can cover, one more.
Okay, Prabhu. So the living entities struggle in this material world because the conditioned soul is bound by false ego, and because he is always influenced by the modes of nature, and the chief of this is mind. So mind has desires, and that is why he is like bound in this material world.
But if somebody says that, some youth, specifically for the youth program, says that there is no struggle in my life, everything is going all smooth, how do we counteract, or how do we answer?
Yeah, so like we have discussed, Prabhu, like in this material world, whatever happiness is there, it is just like we say that it is absence of miseries is happiness. So we feel that it is happiness, like how the example of camel was given. Yeah, so he eats thorns, but then he's tasting the tasting the blood, and then
Okay, I don't have too much time to challenge, otherwise I would have asked few more questions, but thank you very much, Shama Gopika. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Shama Gopika Mataji and group. So we proceed to next group, and we would like some volunteer from this. This is group number 2, which is Dharneshwari Mataji, Dharmeshwar Krishna Prabhu, Anita Goyal Mataji, Lalita Mataji, and Usha Mataji, Sachin Agarwal Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Hare Krishna to everyone.
Hare
so
Krishna.
As Shama Gopika Vallabha Mataji has concluded few points, we are also having the similar points, like the living entities or fragmental parts of Supreme Lord Krishna being eternal in quality. In quality, we both, that is the part and parcel of Krishna. We have limited independence. That also was discussed there. We too had that. Here it is defeating the Mayavada philosophy. That is oneness with the Lord. That also is.
So you have to mention as if you are preaching to a newcomer, Mataji. How would you explain any one concept? Maybe take one point, which if it is not covered,
Yeah. So the living entity has a minimal independence. This minimal independence, when it is used in the Krishna conscious way, we will be able to come out of the cycle of birth and death. Prabhuji. This is one thing we can apply. This as a preaching application. I would like to I would like to express here.
So, but as a challenge to this, we can say that okay, I am right now sitting in this room. I'm free to do anything that I like. If I want to hit the wall, I can hit. How do we say that independence is still limited? Why it is not complete? See, any action I can do, either I can use the energy for good purpose, I can do harm, I can do anything. How do we say the independence is not complete?
Independence is minimal, actually. It's very minimal, actually, only in the execution way. So what we are executing, if it is done in the Krishna conscious way, that is, that time only we'll be able to come out of this cycle of birth and death, Prabhuji. So that I want to insist on the preaching application part. So because if you hate, actually, I think that is not in the Krishna conscious way, that activity. Okay. So whatever we do, like taking prasadam or offering the things to the Lord, so those things, preaching the things. So this type of
even any other activity, even if it is not in Krishna consciousness, still it has to be sanctioned by the Lord. So for example, if somebody wants to raise the hand, if Lord doesn't sanction, we can't even raise our hand. Right? So that independence is there, only limited. There are so many people, like if they have the paralysis and all, they can't raise their limb just like that unless Krishna sanctions. Any other point you had planned, Mataji, from your group?
The ultimate, the second point is the ultimate goal of a purificatory process is to know Krishna as the source of all, Prabhuji. Actually, this one I would like to add, because remembrance also comes from him, and even the forgetfulness for us, the living entities, they forget about their past deeds. That also comes from him only. He is the source of all. So this one point I would like to insist more on, that the remembrance.
So
that is the sun and
Krishna is the source of all remembrances. Say sometimes while sitting in an exam hall, I tend to forget. I don't recollect everything I studied. So why is he not granting the remembrance?
Yes. For every action, I think everything Krishna only grants for us actually. So he's the source of all, Prabhuji. I would insist on that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how do we answer this challenge that why is he not granting me intelligence to recollect everything that I studied? Why only few things? If
That will
Krishna-
be as per our karmic actions only, no, Prabhuji. So we will be getting the sanctions will be getting according to that. What we deserve only we will get actually. So that he only decides. So yeah.
Thank you, Dharaneshwari Mataji and group 2.
Yeah.
Any volunteer from group 3, which is Narasa Reddy Prabhu?
Mangalam Mataji.
Mangalam Mataji. Hare Krishna, Mangalam Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Actually, just to give the points, and this Radhika Mataji will give the philosophical.
Only one point you can mention, Mataji.
Okay.
So that we have
so I want to talk about the word 15.7, the word karsati.
Karshati.
That is very significant. This is for the conditional soul is bound up, as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent, which is driving him in this material existence. That point I want to. That false ego and the mind is the cause for that false, because if you set up your mind, that false ego will not. It will automatically diminish.
So can we just employ a method to engage our mind and it will result in everything else becoming kosher, or there will still be things that will remain open? Say, for example, there are so many meditation methods just to engage the mind and focus the mind. Will it solve everything else?
Yes. If you started chanting 16 rounds, everything will be solved 100%. That I assure you. If that is not chanting means not simply chanting, it should be sincerely. You should involve yourself and do it. If you do it, that will be definitely that false ego and all those things will definitely diminish.
Thank you very much, Mangalam Mataji. You had one more devotee from your group.
Yes.
Who was going to explain?
Yes, Radhika ji, will you
Hare
do?
Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Yeah.
Radhika Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So basically, this expanding on a couple of points of Mangalam Mataji. One point is the shackle, right? So today we are all fighting between whether we have a silver shackle or a gold shackle or iron shackle. So it's a practical application, and every time in the class when I ask, I think many students do intelligently tell we don't want shackle, but there are still some students who say I want the gold shackle. So that means we are all in ignorance, and typically we are all happy with the silver shackle. So this is one practical application, I can tell. And, of the points which I've heard, point 1 group and point 2 group and point 3, I've noticed, probably due to time, some 3 points are missed. So if you give me a couple of minutes, maybe I can share those points.
Yes, ma'am. So we definitely have few more groups. So you can probably cover one point, Mataji, Radhika Mataji.
Sure. So 15.7 was covered by Mangalam Mataji. So I'll move on to 15.15. So where he talks about the memory point, which was covered by Dharaneshwari Mataji. And the last point, I'm the compiler of Veda. So practical application, the Vedesha Sarvesha Ahameva Vedo, right? The last line. Right. So he is the compiler and knower of Veda. Why is he highlighting? Is because he, in his Satya Avesha avatar as Vyasa Deva, is the one who wrote the Vedas. So it is free from the 4 defects. So the Vedas are not human made, it's God given, and it is so perfect. And for example, every time we write an exam, you just told, right? You forget. So what you've studied, you've forgotten. And after you come from the exam hall, next day if I ask you, not only you, Prabhu, even I won't remember anything. And we are not even sure of what we wrote. So that's the difference between our mind and that of Krishna's mind. So he is not just the compiler of Veda, he is also knower of Veda. Unlike us, who are writer of the exam, but not necessarily we will know the content of the exam. Whereas Krishna himself declares that he is the writer and the knower. So I think with this, I'll leave, Prabhu. Anything you want?
One question on this. Say you mentioned that Krishna, in the form of Vyasadeva, has written the Vedas. But even Vedas prescribe so many activities, including killing of the animals. So how did Krishna give such guidelines?
Prabhu, see, basically anything should be taught to the extent of the mind of the person. Example, a couple of points. One is which is mentioned by Mrigari, right? When Narada saw Mrigari, we know the story of Mrigari, so I'm not briefing that. He never asked, hey, what Mrigari, why did you kill? He asked, why are you killing in this way? Does it mean Narada approved killing? No. It is because he wants to take him to the mode of goodness or Sutta Sattva, above that. But one cannot suddenly go, right? So someone who's getting 35 marks, if you tell him you have to get center, it's not going to work. Or if someone is getting 10 marks, what would you tell? We will tell our child that, okay, ma, just pass this time. We'll see next time. Then you will increase the score, hey, get first rank. Or first class, 60%, then 75, then 100. Because the target should be reachable. If the target is above reach, we will not aim. So Krishna is giving this one. Second thing is, the Quran very clearly says that a person should not have a relationship with his wife or with the mother, right? But that is not mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. That doesn't mean that Krishna approves this. It is because the Bhagavad Gita is in a Suddha Sattva state. So it is already understood. So the lower end Vedas explain in detail to address that set of community, whereas it's not required for people in Sattva. We are all not in Sattva. We are moving from one to another. So we have to take, we need to know the various Vedas, but we can skip them and go to Bhagavad Gita, which is like a Gita Upanishad, which has a condense of Sattva, and we can beat our Sattva and go to Sutta Sattva, like Traigunya Vishya Veda, how he says. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Radhika Mataji and Mangala Mataji from Group.
Thank you.
So we would like to cover one more group and probably then go for conclusion. So please don't feel bad like those who we are not able to cover. It's quite difficult to cover all groups. So we'll just cover one more group. Group 4, which is Chetan Prabhu, Divya Rukmini Mataji, Ratna Gosai Mataji, P.S. Murthy Prabhu, Ramesh Prabhu, and Surekha Mataji.
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yes, please.
Prabhu, I think most of them were covered,
Points are
but
covered.
for independence, we actually thought of the example of knife. Say the independence which the individual has in, right? So it's like a knife if it is properly used, right? So like the surgeon, if he properly uses it, it is used for a constructive purpose. But if it is in the hand of a dacoit or some ignorant person, right, it is used for killing. So it's an improper use. So that's something which we covered there. And the other part is the ultimate goal of the Vedas. So the Vedas give the direction, and the ultimate goal of the Vedas is to reach Goloka. So that's one thing which we thought of. And the other part is, so Lord is situated as the super soul in all the living entities. So he's situated as Paramatma. And so he is the one who sanctions as per our desires. So whatever happiness or distress we get, so that is due to our desires, and super soul sanctions it.
So a couple of questions on what you just mentioned, Ramesh Prabhu. So first one about making the choice. So say, for example, if I have made a choice to take up to Krishna consciousness, is my job done? That am I safe to go back to God just based on this?
No, Prabhu. So there are so many things, right? So it's not that so taking up. So it's not like if you have been offered a job, right? And then it's not that you say you'll be in the job for all the time. So once you're in the job, then you'll have to perform, right? So and then there are different levels at your job also. So if you're not performing, then again you'll be say removed. So you'll be jobless. So it's not that say once we have taken up or say we have said that we want to be Krishna consciousness, then everything would be in line. No, so we'll have to strive hard to achieve and then move ahead. So the threshold increases as we move on to.
So till what point the choice we'll have to constantly make?
There is no choice, so it goes on. So till our life, right? So we'll do it, and then post that also. If we are fortunate, if we get the Lord's support, there also we'll have to be as a servant. So
till the last moment we will have choice to make.
No, there is no choice.
There is no choice.
Yeah.
Okay. There is no choice. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but you just mentioned we have minute independence. Minute independence means we have some choice, right?
Yeah, but he said if he says that he has taken up Krishna consciousness, right? And if he wants to move in that, so then it is up to the individual. So whether he wants to reach there, so whether he wants to properly use this life or improperly use it. So if used properly, then he'll become Krishna consciousness and go back to Godhead. If not, then he'll be in this repeated
So do
cycle
we have
of birth
choice
and
or no?
We have.
We have choice. Until
Yes.
how long?
Throughout your life, right? So
Throughout life. Okay. Thank you very much, Ramesh. Thank you, Ramesh
Hare
Prabhu
Krishna
and
Prabhu.
group. So if we were to summarize the section what we just discussed, the 7th verse onwards in 1 or 2 statements, any devotee would like to volunteer? What was discussed in this particular section of transmigration of the living entities? There was a flow in which Krishna has given the message. So any volunteer we have? Not more than 2 lines, 2 statements. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shama Gopika Mother. But if we have devotees who have not spoken so far, if they want to present summary of specifically the groups we couldn't cover, the breakout rooms. Any devotee from that? Covering the section summary in two lines.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Rina
Try.
Yes, Mataji.
Should I try,
Please.
Prabhuji?
Yes, Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, especially when we start, few questions we'll be having in our life, for example, who are we, why we have come here, and why we are struggling here, and Lord is very unkind, and I am suffering, the suffering is because of the Lord, and we have also heard that Lord is a maintainer. For all these, we have reference in these 5 verses, Prabhuji, very important lesson for us for preaching. So we have got the answer, who are we? We are the part and parcel of the Lord, and Mamayamsha Jivaloke, Lord is telling. So it is not that somebody has cooked up. So Lord himself is telling we are the part and parcel of the Lord, and we have all the qualities of the Lord, including the independence. So that is minute independence. So since we are here because we have misused this minute independence given by the Lord, and we are struggling here because of not the Lord's desire. It is because of our desire only we are struggling here. Since we are under the 3 modes of material nature. So we are struggling depending upon our previous karmas. And we are telling Lord is very unkind if we are suffering in this material world. But Lord himself is telling he is present in all the living being as Paramatma, along with the soul. So it means Lord is very kind, even one gets the mean body also, he will be accompanying actually. So he wouldn't have been accompanying. So it means he's very kind, and he is the not only the creator, he is the maintainer. So he's maintaining our gross body by giving us the sun, moon, and all the that jiva rasa, for all the vegetables, and also he's internally he's giving us the fire, that is Jataragni, in the Jataragni form, he's helping us to digest all the food we are eating. And not only for our gross body, for our subtle body also, he is giving all the requirements, that is in the form of remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. And not only that is not the end, he is accompanying us from the remote, from millions of lives as Paramatma. That is the very close friend of our soul. And with the soul, he's been with always as a super soul. And not only that, just like that, he has not left us in this material world. He has given us guidance in the form of Vedas. And one can follow these Vedas, and we can use that knowledge in the, what is that? Restricted manner, restricted manner. All this, we can fulfill all our desires, that is Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And ultimately, we can understand that Vasudevam Sarvamiti, and then one if understand that then we can glorify the Lord, and we can follow this Krishna consciousness, and we can go back to Godhead. So there we can be free of all this material body, and we will be getting the body which is similar to the Lord's body, and we will not be uniting with the Lord anymore, and we will be living, we will be present as the separated living beings, and we will be serving the lotus feet of the Lord. Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Just that we are always separated, fragmented part and parcel of the Lord, now as well as in future. So we proceed to cover the last few verses of this particular chapter, but which are again very crucial. So let me just make it quick. So in Bhagavad Gita, we saw Chatushloki Bhagavad Gita, which was in the 10th chapter. So similar to Chatushloki Bhagavad Gita, this particular chapter 15 also has 3 Shloki Bhagavad Gita. So this 3 Shloki Bhagavad Gita is called text from 16 to 18 in chapter number 15. And then Gita Rahasya, the Manmana Bhavamad Bhakto verse, which appears twice, is considered the Gita Rahasya, and the conclusion of Gita is called the Charan Shloki Bhagavad Gita is 1866. So coming back to this particular section now, that we are going to cover why it is called as 3 Shloki Bhagavad Gita, text 16 to 19 within chapter number 15. So Krishna, having stated that he is the knower of the Vedas, these 3 verses 16 to 18, they give the summary of the Vedanta Sutras. So these 3 verses, they explain the Sambandha Jnana, the Abhideya Jnana. Sambandha Jnana is covered in text 16 and 17. Abhideya, the process of devotional service, is covered in 19. And the ultimate goal, Prayojan Jnana, is covered in text 20th. So these 3 verses are combined together. They are also called as 3 Shloki Bhagavad Gita. So we just cover these verses in brief. So we need some devotee volunteer to read the parts of the translations. Ankit Prabhu, you want to read? All right, so we have few devotees who have raised their hand. Indira Mataji and Jaivan Prabhu, please unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
There are 2 classes of beings, the fallible and infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible.
Yes, just read one more slide, Mataji, so we combinedly discuss this together. Yes.
Besides these 2, there is the greatest living entity, personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the 3 worlds and is maintaining them.
Yes, thank you very much, Indira Mataji. So here Krishna is mentioning about Kshara, which means the fallible living entities, the conditioned ones, and Akshara, the infallible ones, or the Nitya Siddha living entities like Narad Muni and so many residents of the spiritual planets. So Krishna is explaining that there are fallible and infallible living entity, and the fallible ones, they are residing, they are conditioned in the material world, and infallible ones are residing in the spiritual world. But his own position is beyond these 2, Kshara and Akshara. Beyond these 2 classes of living entities, he is always superior and transcendental to these 2 levels. So we proceed. Do we have any other devotee? Last 2 verses to go through. Priyadarshini Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes,
I can't see the screen, Prabhuji. Screen I'm not able to see.
You are not able to see the screen?
No, I'm not seeing the screen. Yeah. May I read?
Sorry, 1 second.
I can see now. Yeah.
You can see. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Besides these 2, there is the greatest, that I think this has been read, Prabhuji.
This we read, yes.
This has been read.
Next one, yeah.
Text, essence of Vedas, yeah, described in 3 verses. Because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. Gita 15.8. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Madhu. So here Krishna is mentioning because of his position, which is transcendental to both Kshara and Akshara living entities, he is celebrated in the Vedas, in all the Vedas, and he is celebrated both in this world as well as in the spiritual world. And the last verse for this 3 shloki Bhagavad Gita, which is text 16, 17 and 18, these constituted the Sambandha and the Abhideya, and this is the last verse, which is 20. Hang on. Did I mistake number? Do we have any volunteer for this?
I can read it, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Valar Mataji. Yes, Mataji, please.
Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. 15.19.
Yes, Mataji. So here, Krishna, it's actually, this is the process, actually, my mistake. 16, 17, they give the Sambandha, the 18 gives the Abhideya, and 19 gives the Prayojan. So whoever knows Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. That is the topmost understanding about Krishna, and our own understanding as the part and parcel of Krishna as the fragmental parts. So now, yes, Valar Mataji, please help read this as well.
Whoever, sorry, Prabhuji, I not yet.
You are not able to see? Okay.
Not yet.
One should submissively?
Not yet.
Oops. Sorry.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, shall I read Prabhuji?
Yes, Dharneshwari Mataji. Thank you, Valar Mataji. Yes, Dharneshwari Mataji. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So one should submissively hear from Bhagavad Gita that these living entities are always subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who is able to understand this according to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, knows the purpose of the Vedas.
Thank you, Dharneshwari Mataji. So if somebody asks us what is Purushottam Yoga, it's very simple. We know the position of Krishna as the Supreme Person, as the one who is transcendental to both the fallible, infallible, and we know the position of all the living entities as the subordinate to him, as being subordinate to Lord Krishna as his part and parcel. And anybody who knows this particular point well is mentioned by Krishna to be knowing the purpose of the Vedas. And now we come to the concluding verse of this. So Prakash Prabhu had previously raised his hand, but we couldn't ask Prabhuji. So Prabhuji, you want to unmute yourself?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhuji, please.
Do you want me to read, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhuji, please.
He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. Bhagavad Gita 15.19.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Please stay Prabhuji online. So we have one more slide for you. So whoever understands the position of the living entities as being subordinate to the Supreme Lord and position of Krishna as being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna is saying that naturally he or she would engage in devotional service to Krishna. And then the last verse. Yes.
In this chapter, the first 5 verses describe the process of freeing oneself from these weaknesses of heart, and the rest of the chapter from the 6th verse through the end discusses punishment, Parshottam Yoga.
Yes,
15.20 purport.
So all the verses starting from the description of the spiritual world, and then the transmigration of the living entity from one body to another through the subtle body, and gaining of the various senses based on the consciousness one carries from the previous body to the next, and based on those senses how the living entity becomes attached, and how Lord Krishna maintains the living entity through thick and thin as external cosmic manifestation, sun, moon, and the fire, as well as the internal fire of digestion, as well as initiating the actions based on the desires that we have been carrying. So understanding Krishna's position as the maintainer, And finally, we learned about the three shloki Bhagavad Gita, the Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. Sambandha is nothing but who is Lord Krishna, what is the position of a jiva as the subordinate fragmental part, what is the process of devotional service. That one who knows this, he engages in devotional service. And in 20th, Lord Krishna is giving the ultimate perfection achieved by such a person. So we just have one slide more to, let me just see. Yes, Prakash Prabhu, just help us with this last slide once.
Sure, Prabhuji.
Yes,
sure. As long as a living entity is in the dark material world, he is in conditional life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no choice, there is no chance of the coming back here in his conditional life. The living entity considers himself to be the lord of the material world, but in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge.
Thank you very much.
15.6 purport. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So even this question is asked by many of our program participants, that now that we are here in this material world, what is the guarantee that after going to the spiritual world, we won't come back? So these are some of the very peculiar questions that we face. And so just to recap, we covered throughout this particular chapter, we presented an overview of chapter 15, how the sections are divided. First one from text 1 to 6, which is about the analogy of the banyan tree and how the living entity gets caught in the various branches of this tree, how to come out of this tree with the acts of detachment and sharpened with determination. Then we learned about the transmigration of the living entity, how we move from one body to another through the subtle body and our desires, and how Krishna maintains the living entities externally, internally. And then we finally saw the three shloki Bhagavad Gita from 16 till 18th verse. And then we saw the explanation of the Purushottam Yoga, which is to understand position of Krishna as the supreme person and ourselves as the fragmental parts. We also discussed various preaching applications from these two important verses, which Srila Prabhupada quotes many times in his classes. 15.7, Mamai Vansho Jiva Loke verse, and 15.15, where Krishna mentioned that from him we are getting the knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Sarva Sachaham Rudhi Samnivishta. So there was one hand raised by Mangalam Mataji. Mataji, you want to say something?
Yes, Prabhuji, I want to say about the 15th chapter.
Okay.
This chapter, no, Krishna revealed the most secret and sacred Shastra. That is the knowledge. Okay, whoever understands this Shastra with wisdom and yoga, he becomes the blessed one. Okay, Prabhuji.
Whoever understands with wisdom and
yoga, he becomes the blessed one.
Thank you very much, Mangalam Mataji. So just few announcements here. Last time Janaki Mataji mentioned on the group that we will be reducing the number of assignments that we have been having. So we won't have assignments every week. Okay, so there will be open book essays, but we have to write to a sufficient level of detail. Now there is a balance to be maintained. One part is that we want to have assignments which will cover, at least on a high level, all the areas that we are discussing, all the chapters that we are discussing. At the same time, we don't want the number of assignments to be too overwhelming. So we are still working out a balance. So recommended set of open book essays are around 2, but which is quite difficult to cover 6 chapters. So we are still discussing internally and we will put a feedback on the group, but expect the number of open book essays to be between 2 to 5, minimum 2, maximum 5 per section. Okay, we'll come back to you on this. And the current one, the timeline is still in progress, but if you have any concerns, suggestions on, are you feeling too overwhelmed with the assignments, or are the assignments feeling like getting bit less than what you would have expected, you would have preferred, feel free to share your feedback.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, is
Hare
there any page limit? I mean, it could be too lengthy.
So recommended number of words are around 750, which, to be very honest, when we sit for writing, it's not too much. 750 just gets over in about 1.5 to little less than 2 pages. So if we are typing, for example, but that is the word limit that is mentioned, Mother. And
but if it goes beyond that, then when you say
so,
detailed means, then what we have to cover so many points.
Yeah, so if you are able to write like point wise and to the point, whatever is asked, even if your answer exceeds that slightly, it is still fine, but it need not, one point should not be repeated. That is what the guideline says. The answer should be to the point. Okay, but word limit I mentioned, like the last one I submitted, I am still checking the feedback. If it is too short, the number of words were around 846, but I had submitted it before latest message by Janaki Mataji. So this is on the assignment part. Any other feedback if we are having assignments quite late, less than what you would have preferred, or was it getting a bit overwhelming having it once a week? We will surely not have. Any other feedback on the assignments part?
One more thing, Prabhuji, this is Dharnishwari here.
Yes, Mother.
See, whatever the assignments we have written last time, and then we have got evaluated and the marks has been shared actually. In that, if one or two assignments, it is around 6 marks, I think we have to resubmit or something like that. It has been mentioned there. Is that the same thing we have to do it? Because now the assignment part we are actually changing, now the process, little changes are there. Right. So still it is applicable for that. I would like to know, Prabhuji.
Sure. So let me just clarify on this and come back on this, Dharneshwari Mataji.
Okay. Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah. One more.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
One more help is there a possibility we can type the assignment? Because as the essays are long, scanning and sending becomes very difficult. It's not uploading.
So Janaki Mataji had put this point last time while giving the guidelines for submission. We are okay to write either handwritten notes or even typewritten. So you can type in.
Not that is for the new ones, Prabhu. I'm talking about the old ones which Dhaneshwari ma'am told, na, that for lesser score.
So for any further assignment, we'll follow a common guideline, Mataji. So we are okay to.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
So in terms of the volume, anybody has any concerns, suggestions that are you feeling overwhelmed if we have around 4 to 5 per unit, which would mean around 4 assignments to cover 6 chapters. So till now we have given only 1 assignment.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, one open question per chapter is quite reasonable, I feel.
Reasonable, yeah. So wherever there is the theme is combined, say 13, 14, 3 modes of material nature was a single theme. So we had only 1 assignment. We'll still try to combine, but otherwise, if it is not matching, if the chapters are discussing slightly different areas, we would prefer like 1 per chapter, if it is not overwhelming for all of you.
Okay, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu. Prakash Prabhu.
In fact, even if we have 1 per chapter, 1 chapter usually lasts 2 or 3 sessions. So that would be 1 assignment for 2 or 3 sessions.
Yes, Prabhuji. So I think it is reasonable, 1 per chapter, so that we are able to cover the areas thoroughly. And even, see, main purpose of writing this assignment is we read Srila Prabhupada's books, purports, and we study them and we refer to them when we are writing our answers. So my worry is that if we don't have sufficient number of open book essays, then probably devotees won't have the reason to study the purports in detail. So that was the only request.
Prabhu, can you share the questions in advance so that when you're taking class, we'll be trying to relate better? Because when it comes to an end, it's like we are revisiting the whole thing, and that's when we
Sure.
write and rush.
So we can give you the whole question bank, okay, which includes the closed book as well as the open book questions for your reference. So closed book questions, you can take a look. Open book need not mean that the open book essay will be from that only. So you have to be open about the open book essay assignment. Okay, but we can share the question bank that is available. Guru Nishta Mataji, Hare Krishna, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. In addition to this assignment which we were given, do we still have to do all the open book essay questions that were given in the question bank before?
It is not mandatory, but definitely recommended. Okay, so it's not what is mandatory. Let me just reiterate. All these open book assignments are mandatory, and clearing the cutoff is mandatory in this. So if we flunk, say for example, if I get less than 65, 60, then I should be ideally rewriting and resubmitting to get qualified. Okay, so this is one. And apart from open book essays, other criteria will be the closed book questions which will come in the examination. So examination will not have any open book questions going forward, and it will have verses memorization. So these two things we have to cover for our exams.
Yes.
Unit level exam. Any other doubt, query on the evaluation part? So I'll just cover a few more announcements ahead. We won't be covering each verse as you would have seen even today. In our discussion going forward, we won't cover all the verses in the chapter. So devotees are requested to go through the verses, go through the purports beforehand, so as to be able to participate in the discussions. So we won't cover verse by verse, we will cover section wise, we will cover theme wise within each chapters. Okay, is this okay for all the devotees? Any concern on this?
No, Prabhuji.
Okay, fine. And we will also inform, and of course that should not be the hard stop for all the devotees, but we will inform the number of verses that we are targeting to cover in the subsequent session. But on a high level, you know that, say for example, today we concluded chapter 15. So devotees, even if this message doesn't come, feel free to read, say for example, 10-12 verses, what is yet to come in the next chapter, so that we are ready. So we'll share these sections. Accordingly, devotees are requested to come prepared with reading, having gone through the verses, translations, and purports. So that is very important for preparation. The Purva Swadhyaya part, which is also mentioned in the handbook, student handbook. So assignments we mentioned, and based on the feedback I got just now from the devotees, we are okay with one assignment around per chapter. Now we won't give a separate assignment for chapter 14 because 13 and 14 we have given combined one. But for the coming chapters, including 15 onwards, we'll try and have one assignment per chapter, and we understand it won't be overwhelming for all of you. And we also mentioned the evaluation criteria. We have to clear the open book essay qualification by scoring minimum 65. So our essays should be of that quality that we clear that qualifying criteria. And final unit test will have only the closed book questions. And closed book questions are both types, one word type of answers, as well as 1 or 2 or 3 statements type of answers. So both of them will be in scope for evaluation, and we will also have the verses memorization part.
There won't be open book questions.
Yes, Mataji. In the final examination, we won't have open book questions. We will cover the open book essays as part of our regular course.
Okay.
Okay, and number of questions are also being reduced. So, sorry, I went a bit overboard. Are there any other questions, any queries?
Prabhuji, by final exam, you mean the third module exam?
Third module exam, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so it
Prabhuji,
will be
and
less cumbersome. Yes, Mataji.
sorry, Hare Krishna. The memorization, all the shlokas that you have mentioned has to be memorized, or there will be some?
There will be some leeways and buffer on that, Mataji. So it won't be all, but exact number we will come back.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, this module has got only these 6 chapters Bhagavad Gita, or we are going to cover Upanishad and all that?
Yeah. So module 3 has only till 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Then unit 4 will start, where we will have Upanishad and NOI.
Okay.
Okay. And why I'm saying is these chapters apart from chapter 18 are a bit smaller. So you will see us progressing on this soon. Okay. So any other query? Yes, Prabhuji.
I hope I'm understandable.
Prabhuji, your voice is very low. Murthy, P.S. Murthy Prabhu. Yeah.
My voice is very bad right now. All I wanted to say was there is a choice given in the question exam. I presume that the choice
is anyone able to hear Prabhuji properly? Prabhuji is asking about choice.
No problem. No.
Choice should not be given.
Choice should not be given. Okay.
Choice should not be given.
Okay.
We are reading Bhagavad Gita, all questions should be
answered. Okay.
If you are giving 9 questions, 9 questions have to be answered. I may answer 2 questions, I may answer 5, or I may answer 7. That's a different point. But question point of view, everything has to be answered.
Sure, Murthy Prabhu.
All questions have to be compulsory.
Noted on this, Murthy Prabhu. And in the closed book questions which will come in the evaluation, don't expect the questions necessarily from the question bank. It will be like a 60-40 or 80-20 breakdown, where 60 to 80% will be from the question bank, and expect few closed book questions apart from the question bank also. Okay. So I think we have clarified everything. Any other query or doubt? If not, we conclude. Prakash Prabhu, yes, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, did we get the marks for our module 2 exams?
We are still awaiting, Prabhu. We are still awaiting the evaluation for the answer sheets. Yeah.
No problem.
Presentation is already uploaded till today. So I just did it before the start of our discussion today. Okay. And those devotees who have not yet marked their attendance, please do so. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Dandavat pranam.